Part II, Chapter 6, Sections 1 and 2 of The Possessed by Fyodor Dostoyevsky, translated by Constance Garnett. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Expatriate in Bangor, Maine. Part II, Chapter 6, Pyotr Stepanovitch is busy. Section 1. The date of the fête was definitely fixed, and Von Lembke became more and more depressed. He was full of strange and sinister forebodings, and this made Yulia Mihailovna seriously uneasy. Indeed, things were not altogether satisfactory. Our mild governor had left the affairs of the province a little out of gear. At the moment we were threatened with cholera, serious outbreaks of cattle plague had appeared in several places, fires were prevalent that summer in towns and villages, whilst among the peasantry foolish rumours of incendiarism grew stronger and stronger. Cases of robbery were twice as numerous as usual. But all this, of course, would have been perfectly ordinary had there been no other and more weighty reason to disturb the equanimity of Andrey Antonovitch, who had till then been in good spirits. What struck Yulia Mihailovna most of all was that he became more silent and, strange to say, more secretive every day. Yet it was hard to imagine what he had to hide. It is true that he rarely opposed her, and as a rule followed her lead without question. At her instigation, for instance, 2 or 3 regulations of a risky and hardly legal character were introduced with the object of strengthening the authority of the governor. There were several ominous instances of transgressions being condoned with the same end in view. Persons who deserved to be sent to prison in Siberia were, solely because she insisted, recommended for promotion. Certain complaints and inquiries were deliberately and systematically ignored. All this came out later on. Not only did Lembke sign everything, but he did not even go into the question of the share taken by his wife in the execution of his duties. On the other hand, he began at times to be restive about the most trifling matters, to the surprise of Yulia Mihailovna. No doubt he felt the need to make up for the days of suppression by brief moments of mutiny. Unluckily, Yulia Mihailovna was unable, for all her insight, to understand this honourable punctiliousness in an honourable character. Alas, she had no thought to spare for that, and that was the source of many misunderstandings. There are some things of which it is not suitable for me to write, and indeed I am not in a position to do so. It is not my business to discuss the blunders of administration either, and I prefer to leave out this administrative aspect of the subject altogether. In the chronicle I have begun I've set before myself a different task. Moreover, a great deal will be brought to light by the commission of inquiry which has just been appointed for our province. It's only a matter of waiting a little. Certain explanations, however, cannot be omitted. But to return to Yulia Mihailovna. The poor lady I feel very sorry for her might have attained all that attracted and allured her, renown and so on, without any such violent and eccentric actions as she resolved upon at the very first step. But either from an exaggerated passion for the romantic, or from the frequently blighted hopes of her youth, she felt suddenly, at the change of her fortunes, that she had become one of the specially elect, almost God's anointed, over whom there gleamed a burning tongue of fire. And this tongue of flame was the root of the mischief, for, after all, it is not like a chignon which will fit any woman's head. But there is nothing of which it is more difficult to convince a woman than of this. On the contrary, any one who cares to encourage the delusion in her will always be sure to meet with success. And people vied with one another in encouraging the delusion in Yulia Mihailovna. The poor woman became at once the sport of conflicting influences, while fully persuaded of her own originality. Many clever people feathered their nests and took advantage of her simplicity during the brief period of her rule in the province. And what a jumble there was under this assumption of independence! She was fascinated at the same time by the aristocratic element and the system of big landed properties and the increase of the governor's power, and the democratic element and the new reforms in discipline and free thinking and stray socialistic notions and the correct tone of the aristocratic salon and the free and easy, almost pothouse manners of the young people that surrounded her. She dreamed of giving happiness and reconciling the irreconcilable, or rather of uniting all and everything in the adoration of her own person. She had favourites too. She was particularly fond of Pyotr Stepanovitch, who had recourse at times to the grossest flattery in dealing with her. But she was attracted by him for another reason, an amazing one, and most characteristic of the poor lady. She was always hoping that he would reveal to her a regular conspiracy against the government. Difficult as it is to imagine such a thing, it really was the case. She fancied for some reason that there must be a nihilist plot concealed in the province. By his silence at one time and his hints at another, Pyotr Stepanovitch did much to strengthen this strange idea in her. She imagined that he was in communication with every revolutionary element in Russia, but at the same time passionately devoted to her. To discover the plot, to receive the gratitude of the government, to enter on a brilliant career, to influence the young by kindness, and to restrain them from extremes, all these dreams existed side by side in her fantastic brain. She had saved Pyotr Stepanovitch, she had conquered him, of this she was for some reason firmly convinced. She would save others. None of them should perish, she should save them all. She would pick them out. She would send in the right report of them. She would act in the interests of the loftiest justice, and perhaps posterity and Russian liberalism would bless her name. Yet the conspiracy would be discovered. Every advantage at once. Still it was essential that Andrey Antonovitch should be in rather better spirits before the festival. He must be cheered up and reassured. For this purpose she sent Pyotr Stepanovitch to him in the hope that he would relieve his depression by some means of consolation best known to himself, perhaps by giving him some information, so to speak, first hand. She put implicit faith in his dexterity. It was some time since Pyotr Stepanovitch had been in Mr. von Lembke's study. He popped in on him just when the sufferer was in a most stubborn mood. Section 2. A combination of circumstances had arisen which Mr. von Lembke was quite unable to deal with. In the very district where Pyotr Stepanovitch had been having a festive time, a sub lieutenant had been called up to be censured by his immediate superior, and the reproof was given in the presence of the whole company. The sub lieutenant was a young man fresh from Petersburg, always silent and morose, of dignified appearance, though small, stout, and rosy cheeked. He resented the reprimand, and suddenly, with a startling shriek that astonished the whole company, he charged at his superior officer with his head bent down like a wild beast's, struck him, and bit him on the shoulder with all his might. They had difficulty in getting him off. There was no doubt that he had gone out of his mind. Anyway, it became known that of late he had been observed performing incredibly strange actions. He had, for instance, flung 2 ikons belonging to his landlady out of his lodgings and smashed up one of them with an axe. In his own room he had on 3 stands resembling lecterns laid out the works of Vogt, Moleschott, and Buchner, and before each lectern he used to burn a church wax candle. From the number of books found in his rooms it could be gathered that he was a well-read man. If he had had 50,000 francs, he would perhaps have sailed to the island of Marquisas like the cadet to whom Herzen alludes with such sprightly humour in one of his writings. When he was seized, whole bundles of the most desperate manifestoes were found in his pockets and his lodgings. Manifestoes are a trivial matter too, and to my thinking not worth troubling about. We have seen plenty of them. Besides, they were not new manifestoes, they were, it was said later, just the same as had been circulated in the X province, and Liputin, who had travelled in that district and the neighbouring province 6 weeks previously, declared that he had seen exactly the same leaflets there then. But what struck Andrey Antonovitch most was that the overseer of Shpigulin's factory had brought the police just at the same time 2 or 3 packets of exactly the same leaflets as had been found on the lieutenant. The bundles which had been dropped in the factory in the night had not been opened, and none of the factory hands had had time to read one of them. The incident was a trivial one, but it set Andrey Antonovitch pondering deeply. The position presented itself to him in an unpleasantly complicated light. In this factory the famous Shpigulin scandal was just then brewing. which made so much talk among us and got into the Petersburg and Moscow papers with all sorts of variations. 3 weeks previously one of the hands had fallen ill and died of Asiatic cholera, then several others were stricken down. The whole town was in a panic, for the cholera was coming nearer and nearer and had reached the neighbouring province. I may observe that satisfactory sanitary measures had been, so far as possible, taken to meet the unexpected guest. But the factory belonging to the Shpigulins, who were millionaires and well connected people, had somehow been overlooked, and there was a sudden outcry from every one that this factory was the hotbed of infection, that the factory itself, and especially the quarters inhabited by the workpeople, were so inveterately filthy that even if cholera had not been in the neighbourhood there might well have been an outbreak there. Steps were immediately taken, of course, and Andrey Antonovitch vigorously insisted on their being carried out without delay within 3 weeks. The factory was cleansed, but the Shpigulins for some unknown reason closed it. One of the Shpigulin brothers always lived in Petersburg and the other went away to Moscow when the order was given for cleansing the factory. The overseer proceeded to pay off the workpeople and, as it appeared, cheated them shamelessly. The hands began to complain among themselves, asking to be paid fairly, and foolishly went to the police, though without much disturbance, for they were not so very much excited. It was just at this moment that the manifestoes were brought to Andrey Antonovitch by the overseer. Pyotr Stepanovitch popped into the study unannounced, like an intimate friend and one of the family. Besides, he had a message from Yulia Mihailovna. Seeing him, Lembke frowned grimly and stood still at the table without welcoming him. Till that moment he had been pacing up and down the study and had been discussing something tête à tête with his clerk Blum, a very clumsy and surly German whom he had brought with him from Petersburg in spite of the violent opposition of Yulia Mihailovna. On Pyotr Stepanovitch's entrance the clerk had moved to the door but had not gone out. Pyotr Stepanovitch even fancied that he exchanged significant glances with his chief. "Aha! I've caught you at last, you secretive monarch of the town!" Pyotr Stepanovitch cried out laughing, and laid his hand over the manifesto on the table. "This increases your collection, eh?" Andrey Antonovitch flushed crimson; his face seemed to twitch. Leave off at once!" he cried, trembling with rage. "And don't you dare, sir..." "What's the matter with you? You seem to be angry." "Allow me to inform you, sir, that I've no intention of putting up with your sans façon henceforward, and I beg you to remember." "Why, damn it all, he is in earnest!" "Hold your tongue, hold your tongue!" Von Lembke stamped on the carpet. "And don't dare!" God knows what it might have come to. Alas, there was one circumstance involved in the matter of which neither Pyotr Stepanovitch nor even Yulia Mihailovna herself had any idea. The luckless Andrey Antonovitch had been so greatly upset during the last few days that he had begun to be secretly jealous of his wife and Pyotr Stepanovitch. In solitude, especially at night, he spent some very disagreeable moments. Well, I imagined that if a man reads you his novel 2 days running till after midnight and wants to hear your opinion of it, he has of his own act discarded official relations, anyway. Yulia Mihailovna treats me as a friend; there's no making you out," Pyotr Stepanovitch brought out with a certain dignity indeed. "Here is your novel, by the way." He laid on the table a large, heavy manuscript rolled up in blue paper. Lembke turned red and looked embarrassed. "Where did you find it?" he asked discreetly, with a rush of joy that he was unable to suppress, though he did his utmost to conceal it. "Only fancy, done up like this, it rolled under the chest of drawers. I must have thrown it down carelessly on the chest when I went out. It was only found the day before yesterday when the floor was scrubbed. You did set me a task, though." Lembke dropped his eyes sternly. "I haven't slept for the last 2 nights, thanks to you. It was found the day before yesterday, but I kept it and have been reading it ever since. I've no time in the day, so I've read it at night. Well, I don't like it. It's not my way of looking at things, but that's no matter. I've never set up for being a critic, but I couldn't tear myself away from it, my dear man, though I didn't like it. The 4th and 5th chapters are... they really are... damn it all, they are beyond words. And what a lot of humour you've packed into it, it made me laugh. How you can make fun of things, sans que cela paraisse. As for the 9th and 10th chapters, it's all about love. That's not my line, but it's effective, though I was nearly blubbering over Egrenov's letter, though you've shown him up so cleverly. You know, it's touching, though at the same time you want to show the false side of him, as it were, don't you? Have I guessed right? But I could simply beat you for the ending. What are you setting up? Why, the same old idyll of domestic happiness, begetting children and making money. They were married and lived happy ever afterwards. Come, it's too much. You will enchant your readers, for even I couldn't put the book down, but that makes it all the worse. The reading public is as stupid as ever, but it's the duty of sensible people to wake them up, while you... But that's enough. Good bye. Don't be cross another time. I came in to you because I had a couple of words to say to you, but you are so unaccountable." Andrey Antonovitch meantime took his novel and locked it up in an oak bookcase, seizing the opportunity to wink to Blum to disappear. The latter withdrew with a long mournful face. "I am not unaccountable, I am simply... nothing but annoyances," he muttered, frowning but without anger, and sitting down to the table. "Sit down and say what you have to say. It's a long time since I've seen you, Pyotr Stepanovitch. Only don't burst upon me in the future with such manners. Sometimes when one has business, it's..." "My manners are always the same." "I know, and I believe that you mean nothing by it, but sometimes one is worried. Sit down." Pyotr Stepanovitch immediately lolled back on the sofa and drew his legs under him. Chapter 7 Bangor, Maine.